channels there. Okay, so another little segment of our introduction to game programming. We're going to talk about prefabs in Unity. And also introduce some concepts, the basic physics concepts, gravity and rigid bodies. Introducing them sort of at the same time, just so that prefabs will have a bit more spice to them. Just a little bit more spice in there. Okay, so let's take a look at our little scene where we kind of left off. We had just brought in some assets through a package, a Unity package, into our main project here, our intro project, or whatever project it is that you're working on here in class. And I'd thrown in a couple of things into my scene here just to kind of show what they had. But for now, I'm going to delete them. All right, so I have an empty scene. It's a 2D scene. And there's nothing in it but a camera. All right, I'll zoom in a little bit. And I know in this game, I'm going to have certain things that are going to be recurring objects, okay? Specifically, I'm going to be dropping apples. Okay, this is the apple picker or cherry picker, whatever, I don't know. This is the apple picker game. So imagine this is, yeah, that's an apple. Looks like an apple, sort of, cherry, apple, whatever. And I'm going to use lots of them, right? And it might not be a big deal. I can just drag them in and over again. That would be one way to do it. But I don't know exactly how many I'm going to have. And I don't know exactly where they're going to be. So I want to create these things just as a resource I can use over and over again. That's where prefabs come in. Okay. So I'm going to start designing this apple as a prefab. And to make that more meaningful, I want to have this apple capable of doing some things for starters. I'm not going to jump right into the scripts so much on the apples themselves, but we're gonna get there. All right, so the apple that I just brought in here, this red apple, it has a sprite renderer on it, so that you can see that sprite image already associated with it. It has a transform, as most do, as every object in Unity does. And now let's add something different, something exciting. From here on, we want to start using physics. We want to start using the engine to really let the engine do what it's good at, be an engine, have it drive the game automatically, sort of things. So let's let it do that. Now, one of the main ways we do that is with physics, with the physics engine. And there are sort of two simultaneous engines going on, two physics engines. There's a 3D physics, and there's also 2D physics that we can use here. We're going to use these 2D objects for now to kick things off, and we'll talk about 3D physics later. But we'll use 2D physics for now. And this is rigid body physics. What rigid body physics means is that things don't naturally deform, right? There's this basic unit called a rigid body, and it's sort of the atomic particle when it comes to physics in Unity, right? They are subject to a lot of things, like in physics, they have mass, they have drag, they have, they interact with gravity and all that sort of thing, all right? So there's lots of cool things about them that allow them to demonstrate physical properties, or physics specifically. Now, if I hit play in the game, you'll see immediately the cool thing is that the apple drops. Right? This is the apple picker game after all, and it does involve things dropping and you have to catch them. So this is a useful thing for the apple to have. All right. So now I have an apple, and it has on it a sprite renderer, and it has a rigid body 2D. So it also has some sort of position in the world, but for now I'm going to make it just 0, 0, because when I'm just working with things in an abstract sense, I like to keep them at 0. If I hit play, it will drop from 0, and so on. All right, so that is an apple. Now say I want to create lots of apples. So how would I do that? I could cut and paste that, but that would be very inefficient. Then how would I want to be able to create these apples that have physical properties and maybe other things in there, and I want to use them in script as well. So I want to do that through creating a prefab. Simplest way to create a prefab is basically take some object from your scene, and I've created a prefab folder here, a couple of different prefabs folder. We'll go to the, let's see, we're going to rename this prefabs folder to Apple Tree Prefabs, because we can do that. That's totally fine. It already has some prefabs in there. Look at this. They have colliders, they have audio sources, they have a bit of script on them, and they also have rigid bodies on them. Okay, so this is a more already advanced prefab. We're not going to use that one just yet because it may have some dependencies on there. But we're going to want to create a new prefab based on our red apple here. So the easiest way to do that is we take it, we drag it, we put it in here. Now we have a red apple prefab, and you'll notice that this box just became sort of filled in, or it became a little blue there, right? Meaning it is now a prefab. I can even delete that prefab. Normally I go ahead and I delete that prefab from the scene, and now if I want to use that apple, I can always just drag it, from there into the scene. It is now a red apple prefab. And if I drag another one, I have another one, and another one, and another one. And if I hit play, you notice they will all drop because they all have the components that were associated with them. Right? So they all have the rigid body 2D, and they all have the sprite renderer, and so on. So that is obviously pretty useful. So let's go ahead and we're going to delete them from the scene. And excuse me. For now, I just want to introduce the concept of instantiating prefabs. So prefabs are sort of the special building block object, or a template for an object. And one of the most powerful things we can do is we can instantiate them through script. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new script. We're going to create an object in the scene. It's going to be an empty, and I'm going to call this object the scene builder. And here, because why not? That sounds like a good name. I'm going to have that object really just as a placeholder in the scene. And what I want to put on that is a new script called scene builder. Okay. Because for some reason, I want to have something that automatically, when the scene comes into existence, we want to have some code that will build the scene. It will actually generate the scene, right? So we're sort of generating a scene here rather than just, placing everything specifically by hand. All right. So the scene builder script, we'll go ahead and open it. It has nothing in it by default other than our normal inheritance from mono behavior. You'll see in a second. Inherits from mono behavior. It has a start. It has an update. We're going to get rid of the update for now. Because the scene builder, what we want the scene builder to do is just a kind of a one-shot thing. It starts up, it builds the scene. Okay, think of it that way. It builds the scene. Now, in order for it to build the scene, it needs to know about the kind of objects that we're going to build with. And one way we can do that is by declaring a public game object. And we're going to use this game object as a template, we're going to call it the prefab apple. Okay, this is going to be our prefab apple, the template that we use. I'm going to save this, come over to here, my scene, and you'll see now quickly, hopefully, the scene builder will now have a space for that prefab apple. I will go to my prefabs, which are in Apple Tree prefabs now. Okay, and I'm going to let the scene builder know about that red apple. Okay, it hasn't done anything with it yet, but it knows about it, so it can use that as its template for whatever it needs to do. So we'll go back over to Scene Builder, and now I'm going to use a special thing called Instantiate. Okay, Instantiate. Now, Instantiate, it takes a prefab, an object prefab, and then takes a position, a rotation, which is a quaternion, and it creates an object from that. Now, it clones the original object and returns the clone, right? So in this case, we don't actually have an actual object in the scene to clone. We're using the prefab as that cloning source. Now, one thing to mention here as well, you see this +9 overloads? That's something we'll get into a bit more later, but basically you have to think there are this version plus 9 other versions of Instantiate. So there's a lot of different ways you can actually use Instantiate. But the standard one is this kind of version here where we say original, position, and this quaternion rotation. And for now, we're going to sort of simplify things by I'm going to give you some code just to go ahead and put in for that quaternion, because rotations are a rather special thing in the world. So I'm going to leave space here. I'm going to have I want to have a position there for my my apple to be at. So I need to, for a position, I need a vector 3. So I'll say new vector 3, and I'm going to have to give it 3 values here. An x, a y, and say 0. Right? So that's going to be my new position. And here I'm going to just use sort of a standard function, quaternion dot identity. Okay. What quaternion identity means no rotation. It means just a standard, don't rotate the object, just put it there. All right. So I've got new vector 3, x and y. So this is the position I want to instantiate these apples at. Now, I could, and why don't I do this? You remember our friend, the for loop. For int I plus plus, no, I less than 8, I plus plus, okay, and we're going to put this instantiation within this for loop here, okay. Use of, for int I equals 0, there we go, it was not initialized, I equals 0 to I less than 8, and this really should be a float. That's fine. We can use floats as iterators. That's totally fine. We can even say, we'll be explicit here, so we don't have any conversions, right? For float, I equals 0 to I less than 8. And the cool thing about that is you could then say I plus equals 0.25 if I wanted to, or 0.5. Float would be good about it. I'm going to save that, and that actually is the value you want to use for x. So why not make it a little bit more readable, a little bit more easy to follow, and say, okay, that's what we're doing for our x value. And for y, well, what should we do for y? For now, let's just say 0. All right. So what are we doing here? We're creating a whole bunch of apples between 0 and 8. So if we're incrementing by 0.5, that means we're going to create what? 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5. We're going to create apples all along that way. We're going to create basically 16 apples. 16 apples at an increment of 0.5 in the x dimension. Let's see what that looks like. That's easiest to say. Okay, so remember now, this scene builder, its job is to build to put in the scene basically 16 apples in a row from x equals 0 to x is less than 8. So it's going to be from 0 to 7.5. It's going to put them at that location with no rotation according to that prefab. All right, and watch carefully. Play. There we go, 16 apples. And they all fell to the end of the world. Let's move them around a little bit, though, shall we? Let's say that they should start off not at y of 0, but y of 4. Save. All right, hit play. Okay, they start at the top. Say we wanted to spread them out more. So we'll start them actually at -8 to +8. And you know what? 0.5, that spacing is just too small. So we'll go ahead back and increase it to the 1. So now we're going to create apples, 16 apples from -8 to +8. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They're never going to hit 8. I should have +8. I shouldn't say that. I'll do this. Equals. Right? So now we'll get 8 negative apples, 8 positive apples, and an apple at 0. Right? So we'll create 17 apples. Save. See them across the top, hopefully. There are. Lots of apples. And you'll see over in here, once I hit play, they all show up as clones of that red apple. Okay, so congratulations. follow along, do that one, and you will have created, you have used prefabs to create objects. Now we'll talk a little bit more. We started talking about arrays and lists, and we can use those as ways to keep track of these objects. Because notice right now they sort of exist, but I really have no way of referring to those individual apples once I create them. I just create them and throw them out in the world, and off they go, which is a little bit nonchalant, we'll just say, and it just kind of throws it out there, and I can't really keep track of those. And we'll start showing how we could keep track of those apples in another follow-on video.